there's this metalloid called tarum. It's used in the now popular solar panels and medical devices, even in spacecraft. Never heard of it? That's not surprising because there's hardly any talk about it, just like there's hardly any production of it. For example, in 2022 the whole world produced only 681 tons of tarum. China, of course, did the most. It produced 500 tons. As for the other countries, well, they're pretty far behind. However, in 2022, thanks to a huge mine in Utah, the US began catching up to China in the production of this rare but vital mineral in today's world. And this discovery could really shift the balance of power in the global mining sector. Tarum. We often hear about copper, tin, lead, gold, silver, and other similar minerals. But when it comes to tarum, you might only hear about it by chance from some experts. The thing is, as we've already mentioned, it's really scarce. Though if you look up at the sky at all those stars, scientists claim that there's a lot more tarum out there somewhere in space. According to them, somewhere in the cosmos is now flying what was on our planet. More precisely, what it was at the time of its formation. The chemical reactions were happening at a crazy pace, and as a result, tarum unfortunately flew off into space as a gas. So what's the deal? There's not much tarum on our planet. It flew off into space before we were even around, back when there was basically nothing at all. How rare is this metal anyway? Surely many have heard about platinum and about how valuable it is because it's so rare in the Earth's crust. Well, tarum is similar to it in terms of how rare it is, which is why it's often called one of the rarest stable solid elements. In 2022, the global production of tarum reached only 681 tons. We already know the leader among countries, China's ahead of the rest, while others, including the United States, are catching up. For comparison, in 2022 the world produced 21.9 million tons of well-known copper. Now it's even more obvious that people have very little tarum. By the way, the copper comparison isn't just to show how rare tarum is. It's because of copper that the US will be able to catch up with China and, in general, have some influence on global affairs even if it's not a game changer. To be more specific, this will all go down thanks to the Bingham Canyon copper mine and the company Rio Tinto that controls it. They've been mining copper there for a long time, since 1906. Over this time, miners have created a pit that's over 4,000 feet deep, 2.5 miles wide, and spans 3 square miles, which earned Bingham Canyon the title of the world's largest human-made excavation and deepest open-pit mine. How much copper do you think has been extracted from this mine, considering how huge it is? The entire world produced 21.9 million tons in 2022, and almost as much copper has been pulled from Bingham Canyon throughout its history, about 17 million tons. By the way, that's more than any other mine in history has produced. So what does tarum have to do with it? How can a huge open-pit mine where they dig up copper really have any serious impact on anything? The thing is, in 2022 Rio Tinto finished building a plant that can turn copper from the mine into tarum. No, it's not magic, alchemy, or anything like that. It's just plain reality. There's sludge, a byproduct from producing copper ore. At the company's new facility, they take this leftover waste and then, under high heat and mixing, they get something like a filtered copper telluride precipitate. According to the company statements, about 20 tons of these not-so-pretty-looking pies are produced annually. Sounds not that impressive, but then remember, in 2022 all of humanity produced 681 tons. One factory makes 3% of the total global production. Now that sounds pretty impressive. The US is happy, it's not a huge leap, but they're getting closer to China. Humanity is even happier because thanks to the Rio Tinto plant, people now have more critically important tarum for green energy production. Solar panels will be the first to benefit from a significant increase in tarum production. We won't count Rio Tinto, which will make money from it. We're talking about companies and people who rely fully or partly on solar power. Their number grows year by year. Here's the proof, check out what the total capacity of all installed solar panels used to be. By the end of the 2000s, it reached only 17 gigawatts. In 2015, it had grown to 50 gigawatts. By 2022, the capacity became literally astronomical, reaching 240 gigawatts. By the way, take a look at how China dominates the entire field. Just a reminder, they're also number one in tarum extraction, and these two facts are connected. Both China and the entire world, according to many experts, aren't planning to halt the development of solar energy. It's forecasted that the total capacity of all solar panels on Earth could go beyond 330 gigawatts by 2030. Still, no one's ruling out the possibility of even more substantial growth. One can logically conclude that more and more solar panels will be required. Here the question comes up again, what does tarum have to do with it? The thing is, regular photovoltaic cells made from crystalline silicon are being actively replaced by semiconductor layers made from a compound of tarum and cadmium. Right now, the demand for tarum exceeds the supply, and the forecast for 2030 won't exactly make anyone happy. Humanity will need more than 1,200 tons of tarum. Just to remind you, the current supply doesn't even reach 700 tons. So even the seemingly small 20 tons from the Utah plant is already a big deal that'll truly help a huge number of people and companies. You can't point to any specific reason why tarum is better than silicon solutions for making solar panels, it's just that there are so many reasons behind it. To begin with, let's talk about something that'll make all manufacturers happy. Modules made of tarum and cadmium can be produced in less than 4.5 hours. By the way, if we look at it from an economic standpoint, this also lowers the final price. Not counting the markup, the product's price is made up of many components, one of which is the worker's wages, which can depend on the amount of time spent working. In short, less work means less money needed for the worker, and so, in a perfect world, the final price would be lower. On top of that, the process of producing photovoltaic elements from tarum and cadmium is generally cheaper than that of silicon-based counterparts. As a result, such panels can be found at 46 cents per watt, which is about 70% cheaper than crystalline panels. Panels made of cadmium and tellurium are also way more flexible than traditional silicon ones. The advantage is obvious, they can be installed where bulky traditional options can't fit. Flexible versions can be attached to a plane, a car, basically, they can go anywhere. By the way, this is the only thin film technology that's cheaper than regular silicon solar cells. However, there's also a downside. Panels with elements made of cadmium and tellurium are less efficient at converting solar energy into electricity compared to silicon ones, not by much, on average about 1 to 6% less, but for some people this might seem like a serious drawback. The good news though is that once again, the cheaper cost comes into play. You can just install more panels to make up for the lower power. Overall, this all sounds really cool. Right now, such panels are mostly used by industry. They just have a lot of space where they can install tons of panels and save money. Though, there's information that First Solar managed to push the efficiency of cadmium telluride cells to 21.1% in their labs back in 2014 and then to 22.1% in 2016. If they can keep the low price and the same efficiency in the commercial version, then those panels will probably be in almost every home, and that would make the Rio Tinto factory way more important. Other application, the panels made from tarum and cadmium are so convenient to use that they're perfect for space. The thing is, there's already tarum there, not the one that flew off our planet billions of years ago, but the one NASA launched into space on the NUSTAR Space Telescope in February 2013. The rotation speed of the supermassive black hole at the center of the NGC 1365 galaxy was measured using this telescope. In 2017, researchers from Durham University and the University of Southampton analyzed data from NUSTAR and announced the discovery of supermassive black holes at the center of the NGC 1448 and IC 3639 galaxies. Additionally, with NUSTAR they were able to detect X-rays emitted from the opposite side of the black hole, and all this was made possible thanks to cadmium-zinc telluride. It's part of the telescope's detector. But that's too far from us, so let's return from space to a place closer to home, for example, to the nearby hospital. As scary as it sounds, they're bombarding tarum not with weapons but with neutrons. This is a common way of getting iodine-131, which in turn is used to treat certain thyroid conditions. For example, in small doses, it can be used to treat hyperthyroidism. And if you increase the dose, iodine-131 works for treating thyroid cancer. Where else can this rare metal be used? Well, for example, tarum compounds are specialized pigments for ceramics. By the way, you can read about this on the internet, which is currently transmitted to your home through fiber optics, where tellurides might also be used. Tarum can also be used as a highly efficient elementary thermoelectric material and is present in a number of photocathodes used in photomultiplier tubes. Tellurium can be used in a lot of other ways too. Overall, this metalloid is definitely important. So even 20 tons from the Rio Tinto plant is something that can satisfy the needs of many people and businesses. Rio Tinto in Minnesota, by the way, has a mine and plant not just in Utah. They have a lot of other projects that promise the US and the whole world tons of valuable minerals that are really needed for modern technologies. One of them is the Tamarak project, a joint venture with Talon Metals. This time the company's focus will be on the state of Minnesota and nickel, the metal that's used in battery production, and they're everywhere now: cars, phones, laptops, and so on. I think it's clear how important additional nickel extraction will be for the US. Take a look at this table and try to find the United States. Yep, they're just not here. The country mines less nickel than Madagascar, which ranks last with 60,000 tons annually. Let's reveal the secret behind the numbers in this list. In 2023, the US produced only 17,000 tons of nickel. So the country needs everything that nature can give. And in Minnesota, nature's been kind. It's expected that the deposit will yield around 3,600 tons of nickel daily, or 1.3 million tons of nickel annually. Tamarak project will not only elevate the US to second place in nickel production, but it could also revolutionize the nickel game overall. Tesla's already on board for the revolution, as it needs nickel for its batteries more than anyone else. The company is committed to buying 75,000 tons of nickel concentrate over 6 years after the planned mine opens. However, it's a lot more complicated than extracting tarum from copper sludge at a plant in Utah. We'll have to dig up a whole lot of stuff. Nickel, of course, is buried underground. There's no ready-made quarry, and right next to the planned mine site, there are streams and wetlands. By the way, wild rice called manuming grows there. Anyway, Minnesota has a lot of water, and it's no wonder people call the state the land of 10,000 lakes. Meanwhile, iron has traditionally been mined here, which, although it doesn't exactly make locals happy, is something everyone's used to. But nickel, however, could cause a disaster. Here's the thing: this metal is connected to sulfide ores, which, when they come into contact with air and water, trigger a chemical reaction that releases things like sulfuric acid. Probably not going to be good for the local environment. There's even a 2017 study from the University of Minnesota that mentions lakes, streams, and wetlands with high levels of byproducts from sulfide ore reactions are very unlikely to be a habitat for wild rice, and clearly not only for that. Talon Metals, along with Rio Tinto, promises that nothing bad will happen. For example, they claim that a tunnel boring machine will be used to create a cement tunnel. It'll protect the groundwater from interacting with the ores. Plus, they say Talon Metals will build a waste processing and disposal plant at a dry industrial site in North Dakota, and the nickel ore will be transported there in sealed containers by railroad. All we can do now is hope things turn out this way, because the need to gather more of the resources we rely on today shouldn't come at the cost of nature issues. But let's go back to tarum. Of course, like always, the plant, which has basically become strategic for the US, has its opponents. And this is despite the fact that thanks to tarum, there are more solar panels being installed, which in general will improve the environment. The more renewable energy sources we use, the less coal is needed and the fewer carbon dioxide emissions our atmosphere gets. Plus, it's worth mentioning that the production of tarum at the new plant reduces the amount of waste generated from copper production. Without the tarum circuit, the system that extracts the rare metalloid from copper sludge, leftover materials from electro-refining and chemical treatment would simply be sent for disposal. Now, however, they're turned into valuable tarum, sent for purification, and then become part of everything we've already mentioned. By the way, Rio Tinto has a lot of experience in how to get valuable resources out of waste. For example, let's take lithium. The company started its production from waste rock at the mine plant in California. As stated by Rio Tinto, by 2021, output at this pilot plant had already reached 10 tons per year. And that's just the beginning. The company also said that the pilot plant was just there to show that it works. They were also assessing the possibility of building an industrial-scale plant capable of producing at least 5,000 tons of lithium from waste. By the way, this would be enough for about 70,000 electric cars. You think that's it? Not at all. In Canada, scientists from Rio Tinto found a way to extract and purify rare scandium from titanium dioxide production waste. So the company has experience in getting something rare out of waste. However, there are still components of the tarum plant to start. There are those who are generally against any plants. That's understandable. Some people are against those particular solar panels that use cadmium telluride compounds. Cadmium is toxic, which raises the issue of disposal. There is a solution: recycle solar modules at the end of their lifespan, which, by the way, is 25 to 30 years. However, back in 2013, it turned out that recycling cadmium and tarum modules cost more than selling off the recovered materials. At the same time, it was said that future methods could bring costs down by cutting out expensive and environmentally harmful processes. For example, it was suggested that the most promising option might be vulcanization, vacuum distillation combined with the mechanical double green process. This could allow recovery of tellurium with a purity of up to 99.92%. Yet the method never gained much traction. Does it stop anyone? Doesn't look like it. Rio Tinto struck a deal with First Solar, the largest producer of panels that use cadmium and tarum, which means all the tarum first goes for refining and then straight into making solar modules. And even the critics of cadmium-tarum systems can't seem to slow First Solar down. In 2023, they opened a new plant in Ohio where they're planning to churn out solar panels with a total capacity of 3.5 gigawatts. So nobody's planning to slow down. The need for panels and other products that use tarum is growing and will keep on growing for an indefinite amount of time. So Rio Tinto's plan is here to stay as a key strategic asset. Getting a really rare element out of copper waste turned out to be a smart move. In just a short time, Rio Tinto has become a company that's both closing the gap between the US and China in tarum production and making it possible to produce lots of things people want.